how to attach jump rings to bezels and pendants using micro welding. Today I'm going to demonstrate for you how to weld jump rings onto a bezel. For example, if you wanted a connector, but you've got a pendant like this, and you want to make it into a connector, where I'm going to show you how best to weld a jump ring onto this. Or if you wanted something like a Y shape, either for a rosary or a Y necklace, so you have this way and that. So sometimes you just have to position and you can't find what exactly you're looking for. Position your own jump ring. So we're going to do that today. So first, what I'm going to do is cut away this ring. And I'm going to try to find one that is almost exactly the same size. This is fairly close. And note that if you happen to have one that is a little bit off size, you can resize it. And in this case, it's very similar. But if you don't, you might just have to cut that whole thing off. And I'll show you a little later. So first, what you want to do is you open the jump ring so that you can close it again. And make sure that the sides are touching. And so you pivot open, and then as you close it, you're grinding it so that there is no space. And you check this way to make sure that you're well prepped. Okay. Then you want to weld here. So it's hard to hold on to things, so I'm going to introduce a third arm. I think it is worthwhile to talk about this right now. You see, this is circular, and so is this. The amount of space the amount of contact this will have with this is very little. And you see here, this was soldered on, and there's a bit of glue-like paste of solder, of silver. And it acts as almost like a paste to fill in this area so that it becomes stronger. With welding, basically there is no solder, no glue, no paste, that idea. There's nothing that you can fill in the gaps with. And how it works is it fuses this together by running electric current. So what you want to do is either flatten this, both sides, so that they touch as much area as possible, or you flatten out one side so that it fits together more like this, and then you weld here. So you can decide which way. Jump rings are easy in the sense that easier because you can flatten out this part. And I've said it in another video. So the jump ring is like this. If you flatten this out a little bit, even though it is rather minuscule, the difference, it will create more surface area. So you might want to do that, flatten out where the seam is. And also, if need be, if this is really round, the curvature, you can flatten this part out, either by filing it down a little bit or pushing it down. So if this is very thin, you don't want to file it down any further. I would say, okay, so I'm going to see right here. I'm just going to flatten out this bit. You can do that with side of your pliers, like that, where exactly you want. Or if it's on this side, you can press down so as to flatten out and prepare that the edge is flatter and this a little bit flatter so you have more space. Okay, so I've decided I want the jump ring. I'm gonna eyeball. You might want to be more precise using marker. I've marked it, and there are these very inexpensive diamond files in a package. I mean, this whole set cost me $16. But if you don't have it, any heavy emery board will work. So what I'm going to do, I changed my mind. I'm going to flatten this out a bit. Now, this is just a flat file. If there is enough silver around the bezel, what's even better is to have one that is rounded so that you're just filing a small channel. And the purpose of this video isn't to do a whole lot of silversmithing. So I'm just going to keep it very simple. So basically it gives you little bit of extra room for grip right there. And I can feel where it just sits naturally. And I'm going to just flatten out this little point. Just a wee bit. Okay. All right, so now this is my third arm. You know, when you're dealing with 3mm little jump rings, it gets hard to see as you age. Okay, so this is third arm, which I've introduced. Third arm swivel clip. Names are like that. Any silversmithing store, they're very inexpensive. Or you can actually even look online. Okay. So now I can just align it and weld. Okay. So let's see if you can try to move my arm so that you can see. So I've got it touching here. I've got it lined up with the line. Okay, so that did it. Now, I wouldn't have so much smoke if I use argon, but I want to show you without argon because a lot of people don't have it. So here is a close-up, but it's not very strong because the other side doesn't have it. Whereas here you see with solder, they add to it. And what I've done is I've put it in the middle, but sometimes you want to double check. And this weld just holds this here. And I'm going to just hold it in place while I weld the other sides. So I'm just going to move this aside so that you can see it better. And I can tell you that if I was to twist it, it'll come off right now. So what I'm going to do, and this is at 9.5 watts. So and this is 22 gauge, so it's strong enough to penetrate through and fuse 22 gauge together. We just want it to go, and let me see if I can push it down a little bit so you can see better. You can see it like that. So I'm going to not only try to fuse this to that, but right in the middle where the jump ring is, where it connects. Seam of the jump ring. I'm going to. There we go. Okay. So, just to let you know what I did, in fact, by doing that. I guess they were not touching properly. the jump ring snapped open or would have been blown out. Instead, it stayed, but it stays. It has fused to the side of the bezel. So there you have, and it's pretty good. So if you're not sure, I would also try to connect here on the side for another weld. Okay, so that's good. Okay, so I've welded this on, but say if you feel that, oh, this has a lot of solder and looks more secure, and I'm worried about this part and I want to reinforce it somehow. You can use a bit of wire. Here, just gonna show you. And what you can do is I'm just going to put it around like this, around the base. So I'm going to clip it in as tightly as possible, as snugly. I don't want too much. So I'm going to do this. Okay. And then I'm going to trim it. Trim off the excess. Remember, I just want a little bit of reinforcement because it's very thin. You don't have to because it was secure enough, but I figured since I'm doing this video, I might as well show. Somebody's going to ask me about solder. Okay. Now, you could do it like this, or just leave it and trim it later. Just wrap around. I'm going to hold on to this end and okay. So you'll see it's not the prettiest because it doesn't flow like solder does. Let's see if you can see this. On the side, bits of that has melted and created a ball down here. So you can just do the same thing on the other side. So it creates two balls and then on the other end as well. So we're going to try to do that. Okay. Okay, let's see if you can see. So it's gotten thicker at the base here. And it's okay if there's a lot, then you just remove it by reaming, etc. And so it's effectively like having solder. I have to continue on the other side. Sometimes bits do fly and you have to just brush it away, file it away later. I do the corners as well. Okay. Now I'm going to see if you can see that. You see this part? There's a buildup of silver here. That's from the silver wire. Okay, so this time I'm going to show you what happens, what you should do if you don't have the right size of jump ring. So this is the smallest one I have, and I want that to match this. What you can do is go to where the seam is. Oops, it's so small. Okay, here we go. You go where the seam is, just cut a little bit away. Okay, and I'm also just eyeballing this. So let me see if you can see that. So I've cut, and it's like a letter C. Then what I'm going to do is bend it. Just going to hold it like this. That's tricky because it's so small, but I'm gonna do it. Okay. So I'm maneuvering it. So now I've closed it. Basically it was like this. So I cut it, so it was a C. Then I go this way, because it's pretty hard. It took a while, and then you press it down so that it's as round as the other side. Okay, I cut about maybe a bit too much. It's close enough for the sake of this. It doesn't cost too much for me to make another one now that I know better, right? If you're doing multiples. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to flatten it out a little bit more. And then we're going to weld. Okay, so it's tricky when you're maneuvering it in 3D and you lose your spot. So what we want to do is eyeball it, make my mark, and I think, yeah, I want it there. So then again, I'm going to use my file. Make my little groove. It's a tiny, small groove. And if any of you have done pottery making, you know that actually when you rough up both sides, it makes them fuse better, more easily. Okay. So I'm going to clip it here. And I'm going to hold on to this with the seam pointing this line as my guide. Okay. And maybe I'm just going to lower this so that it melted without blowing anything away. Without making a pit. Go. And I am going to show a close-up. I'm not sure if you can see that. You see the difference? There's a little divot where the silver melts. Whereas here, obviously someone has used solder and it flowed and filled to make it thicker. And this part where there is a definite divot, either you can use less power in the future, or you could also just file it. File it flatter so it's not as noticeable. I hope you found that interesting. And if you did, please like and subscribe, as well as comment. It helps the algorithm for YouTube. I'm a wholesaler of premium quality chains and findings, as well as micro welders. I'm going to leave a link below with more information about my company, as well as the components I've used in this video.